You're watching Uatv English. We broadcast from the heart of Europe, Ukraine, Zonia. My name is Anna Nichenko. Hello and welcome. Results of NATO summit is our topic for today. So, President Zelensky called these results good, but if there were an invitation to NATO, they would be ideal. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden says the process of Ukraine's Euro-Atlantic integration will rely on the achievement of reforms within the state, while the long-term security support from the US and allies won't depend on this.
We just concluded the first meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council, and all our allies agreed Ukraine's future lies in NATO. That's not a surprise to any of us, I don't think. I hope it's not a surprise to you, Mr. President. Allies all agreed to lift the requirements for membership action plan for Ukraine and to create a path to NATO membership while Ukraine continues to make progress on necessary reforms.
Ukraine will join NATO as soon as the security situation stabilizes, President Vladimir Zelensky said at the press conference in Vilnius. He added, when the war ends, Kyiv will definitely be invited to NATO and will definitely become a member of the alliance. And he didn't hear any different opinion.
Understand, partners help us with weapons, and this is a moment of survival, and we really need that. We understand that some are really afraid to talk about our membership in NATO now, because no one wants a world war now. And this is understandable and logical. I want everyone to understand that we are civilized and adequate people. Ukraine is fighting with the clear understanding that Ukraine cannot be a member of NATO while the war is going on. This is completely understandable, but the important signals that sounded today at our bilateral meetings, both with the Secretary General and with our partners, and we met with many today, is that Ukraine will be a member of NATO.
NATO leaders have agreed at a summit in Vilnius that Ukraine's future lies within the alliance, but stopped short of handing Kyiv the invitation or timetable for accession that the country has been seeking. At the same time, NATO dropped their requirement for Ukraine to fulfill a so-called membership action plan, effectively removing a hurdle on Kyiv's way into the alliance.
We fully support Ukraine's right to choose its own security arrangements. Ukraine's future is in NATO. We reaffirm the commitment we made at the 2008 summit in Bucharest that Ukraine will become a member of NATO. And today we recognize that Ukraine's path to full Euro-Atlantic integration has moved beyond the need for the membership action plan. Ukraine has become increasingly interoperable and politically integrated with the alliance and has made substantial progress on its reform path.
Ukrainian partners have agreed a three-part package bringing Ukraine closer to NATO. According to Stoltenberg, this is a multi-year program of practical assistance, establishing a new NATO-Ukraine Council and reaffirming that Ukraine will become a member of NATO.
We reaffirmed that Ukraine will become a member of NATO and agreed to remove the requirement for a membership action plan. This would change Ukraine's membership path from a two-step process to a one-step process. We also made clear that we will issue an invitation for Ukraine to join NATO when allies agree and conditions are met. This is a strong package for Ukraine and a clear path towards its membership in NATO.
Stoltenberg said that NATO made its strongest decision regarding Ukraine on the way to its membership with the full knowledge that Moscow would protest. But according to him, NATO will never allow Moscow to decide who can and who cannot be a member of the NATO. Let's be honest, Russian position now and before the full-scale invasion really differs.
Ukraine now takes the place of Russia in the architecture of continental security. That is what Russia has been striving for all these years. But it lost the chance after the invasion. Kyiv has become not just an integral part of the renewed alliance. Ukraine itself renews the alliance.
As a part of help, the first F-16 fighter jets should fly in Ukrainian airspace by the end of the first quarter of next year. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said that. He added that Vilnius summit made steps to make victory for Ukraine closer.
We proceeded from the assumption that all conditions are already in place for the invitation to be extended here in Vilnius, while the membership itself would take place when conditions allow. But we will keep working with allies on moving this process forward.
We'll continue this topic with my guest, Vladimir Dubovic, Associate Professor at Mechnikov National University. Hello and welcome, Vladimir.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
NATO continues to adhere to the open door policy, and Ukraine will be invited to NATO when all the conditions are met. But this is impossible now because it would mean involving the USA in a war with Russia. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller said this. Your opinion about these 2 days NATO summit, about support and assistance to Ukraine, including the long-term security support from the USA and allies, and what do you think? Your conclusions?
Well, I tend to agree with our President Zelensky. The summit was good, but not ideal. It's not perfect. It's not optimal for us. On the good side, it was reaffirmed that there will be continuous support and assistance to Ukraine. Weapons supply, financial assistance, the alliance is clear about that. And actually, some more serious types of weapons have been promised to us, like President Macron, for instance, promised longer-range missiles on the first day of the summit, and some others are coming up with more assistance, weapons assistance to Ukraine. Another thing is, of course, everyone is thinking more about security guarantees to Ukraine. If not NATO as an alliance, then at least G7 members, for instance, who were present, their leaders were present in Vilnius as well, they come up with some sort of a suggestion and proposal to Ukraine in what they call security guarantees, looks more like security assistance package to Ukraine, not necessarily security guarantees, but at least there is a movement in that direction. That Ukraine belongs in NATO, and Ukraine's place is in NATO. It's set and communicates really nice, but at the same time, it's not far removed from awkward and unfortunate language that was in the Bucharest 2008 summit, when also was said that Ukraine one day will become part of NATO, but no one said when, under what circumstances. It's been 15 years. There's been a lot of progress on the part of Ukraine in terms of meeting the criteria. And of course, there's been a year and a half almost of fighting on behalf of European security and Europe, free Europe, where Ukraine is actually fighting back the Russian aggression. And it's a free and fair fight for international order, for European security, definitely for everyone in the eastern part of Europe. But at the same time, it's not appreciated enough. So therefore, we hear same kind of demands in terms of Ukraine that we need to meet certain criteria. We are working on them. Interoperability been mentioned. There've been a unprecedented amount of interoperability in the last year and a half with Ukrainian military working with NATO counterparts and using NATO weapons. And basically, I don't know what kind of interoperability you can see. I mean, there's less in between member states, I think, than between Ukraine on one hand and NATO on the other. So therefore, I understand, that Mr. President Zelensky, when he was coming to Vilnius, he wasn't happy and even called the idea not to mention the particular concrete timeline for Ukraine joining an absent. We would love to have this timeline. We would like to have a hint. We would like to have an idea about when we can actually join, when the war will be over. But what do you mean? What if the war will not be over? What if the war will become not a large-scale invasion like it is for the last 15 months or so, and would become a low-intensity conflict like it was for 8 years between 2014 and 2022? That could range, and drag for a long time. And would that mean that for the duration of this period of time, Ukraine would never be allowed to join NATO? So, in that case, of course, Russia would make sure that this war goes on and on and on and on, so to prevent Ukraine from joining. So there are some unanswered questions there. It's definitely progress, but at the same time, maybe not as much as we in Ukraine have hoped for.
And on the other hand, Russian propaganda claims that Zelensky achieved absolutely nothing at this summit. We see a support, we see results. What does this summit, on your opinion, mean for Russia?
Well, for Russia, it's maybe not the worst type of outcome, because if Ukraine would receive some invitation right now into NATO, that would be the worst. But that wasn't to happen. At the same time, if Ukraine would receive a clear pathway and a timeline, let's say within 2-3 years or something like that, that would be also not great. So the confirmation that Ukraine belongs to NATO and Ukraine's place is in NATO, and the continuation of cooperation between NATO alliance on one hand and Ukraine on the other, and decision to keep unity and coherence and commitment to Ukraine's security for the coming years, for the duration of this war and beyond this war. And these are the signals and messages that they clearly don't like in Russia. They hoped that by this time of this war, the Western alliance, the Western unity, Western coalition of countries supporting Ukraine would unravel, would cease to exist, that Ukraine would be left alone, would be forgotten and abandoned by the West. But that's not what is happening. Actually, we're talking about new types of weapons that were not discussed before, like longer-range missiles, and Americans apparently thinking about finally providing attacks, and maybe Air Force, and maybe more air defense systems, and more stuff. So this is not what Russia hoped for this war to have on this stage of the war, like year and a half into this war. So therefore, I don't think they are surprised in a positive way, but they are getting some signals about the West continuing to stand with Ukraine.
You said that Ukraine won't be left alone, and alliance will help us with this. But speaking about next steps, you announced some of these steps of NATO. Zelensky said that in mid-2024 in Washington will be next NATO summit. Maybe then will be the victory of Ukraine. What are you seeing till this time? What kind of support will alliance give to Ukraine?
I think that we will receive the same kind of support that we've received in the last 15 months or so. So it's basically financial assistance for our economy, for our country, for our economy to stay afloat, frankly, because of all this destruction that we're going through. But also, of course, weapons supply, because some weapons have been supplied. There is always some progress, like in the recent few weeks, there's been this decision to provide Ukraine with cluster munitions, for instance, a controversial move, but we need them in our offensive to liberate our land. And Americans understand that when there is a shortage and not enough of regular artillery munition, then you need to look for what is available, what can you give to Ukraine, because Ukraine needs to come up with a more successful offensive, obviously, in this coming weeks and months. So I think there will be this continuous support of Ukraine, relying on Ukrainian military, first of all, of course. So the fighting will be done as before by Ukrainian military, but with financial assistance and weapons provision by a number of countries. The Ukraine Defense Contact Group, which we know in Ukraine under the name of Ramstein, continues to meet, and they decide on a regular basis what Ukraine needs right now, what is the need for Ukraine in the coming weeks and months, and then continue sending that. There have been some delays in sending weapons to Ukraine; those needs to be addressed. Some of the weapons that have been already committed to Ukraine, they haven't arrived yet to Ukraine. That needs to be addressed. They need to do better work on provision and on logistics of supply to Ukraine. That's a format we've been working with our allies and partners in the West for the last 15 months, and that's how it's going to be in the coming months, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Vladimir, thanks a lot for your explanations, for your opinion, and for taking part in our program. I'll remind to our viewers it was Vladimir Dubovic, Associate Professor at Mechnikov National University. And at the end of the program, I'll remind you some words of Zelensky. He attended the concert in center of the capital of Lithuania. There was really festive mood on the square in Vilnius. So let's watch.
Дякую за вашу допомогу нашій обороні.
Thank you for your help in our defense, for your clear and honest, and importantly, courageous position on inviting Ukraine to NATO. Ukrainian flags on Lithuanian streets clearly prove that we are already allies, and Ukraine will defend its freedom as well.
Your support clearly proves that we are already an alliance, and now Ukraine defends its freedom as well as freedom of Europe and of the world democracy. It's really important that you understand this. Thank you for watching. It was Uatv English. We broadcast from the heart of Europe. See you.